welcome to today's live lesson where we're going to be talking about playing your first song. And I just did a YouTube video a while back that's about to be released. It's called, Play 12 Songs with 2 Chords.
Yeah.
So I figured I'd do a live lesson kind of based off of this. So if you're brand new to the guitar, this is going to be a really cool lesson because you're going to have 12 songs to choose from, popular songs, that you can play only using 2 chords, which is really great. I mean, that's the reason why we put all this effort and practice into our strumming, into our chords to play music, right? We're going to be focusing on one of these songs out of this lesson, Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles, but all 12 songs are listed in the PDF resource for this lesson. It just has what chords are used and a couple of strumming patterns you can use throughout each part of the song. So you can just go through all 12 of those, see which one you like best, and tackle that, and that can be your goal for the week or the month. But, as somebody who's maybe not a beginner guitar player, maybe you're more intermediate, I'm going to go through 10 tips for learning songs and then use one of these songs, the Beatles tune, as kind of an example to play and figure out songs that you actually want to play and get into your fingers. You know?
Yeah, exactly. So in the PDF that you can download, it has, as Nate said, all 12 songs. The chords with chord diagrams are there too. So they don't all use the same 2 chords.
Right.
I know a while back, maybe a couple of years back, you did a lesson on 10 songs with 4 chords. That was 10 songs basically using the same 4 chords and then using a capo. This is just 2 chords for each song. Some of them are different. I know a couple use bar chords, but it's great because there's only 2 chords. It's a great way to be like, I want to work on my B minor bar chord. You throw it in with one of those songs. So, yeah, as Nate said, Eleanor Rigby is the one we're going to be working on. I think the whole thing is just 2 chords, right? So it's E minor and C major. So if you know those chords, you can play the song.
Yeah, we'll go through that one in more detail and then give you the 10 tips for learning songs. And then we'll touch on one more real quick just to give you another example.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's perfect. So do you want to maybe, while people are getting their questions in, by the way, if you want to ask a question, questions tab below if you are an Academy member, and you can just submit your question. We love to answer your questions. We'll have time at the end to go through those. Anyways, do you want to play some music?
Yeah, this kind of gave some ideas to us as far as, learning this Beatles tune gave us some ideas for the lessons. I think I'm going to do a finger style lesson on it, kind of arranged just for the song, because it's something will develop a lot of really cool skills. But we're just going to jam on all 3 parts of Eleanor Rigby, and I'll just kind of see what happens. Play some melody, play some chords.
Yeah, we'll see how it turns out.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. That was fun. That was really good.
I like that, yeah.
So by the end of this lesson, if you're brand new to the guitar, you should be able to at least start putting the pieces together and getting the practice points in order to be able to play along to that tune with just 2 basic chords and a couple of basic strumming patterns. First off, let's just start with the 10 tips for learning a tune. The first one is active listening. And this is something, especially on this song, that will really help you out because there are a couple of really weird timing things.
Yeah.
So take, 15 minutes and listen to this song 3 or 4 times. Don't do anything else. Put your headphones on. Just listen to it. The first time, don't even think anything. Just listen to what's happening. And this is true for any song that you want to learn. Listening initially is probably the most important part, and that's where I learned most of the song for standard, non-really involved stuff. Listen actively. Don't think about anything first. Second time, really follow along to be really intentional listening to the guitar part or the chord structure. And then next time, be really focused and try to maybe guess what's coming next and kind of remember what's coming next. But active listening is the very first step to learning a song, and it can cut down on the time it takes to learn a song a lot. If you listen to it and you can kind of hear in your mind what's coming next in the song, and you kind of memorize it that way. So that's tip number 1. So, pull this song up on YouTube or your iTunes or whatever, just give it a listen. Or any of these 12 songs, go through the 12 of them and pick one or 2 out, and just listen to it. That's step number 1. And step number 2 to learning a song is kind of finding the tonal center or whatever key the song might be in. Now, the key of this song is kind of weird, but I'm just going to call it E minor for simplicity's sake. And we'll get to the chords later. But learning what the tonal center of a song is very important, whether that's from a piece of tab online, a chord sheet online, or whether you just, go through the chords of a tune and you can know enough about music theory to know, hey, the song is in E minor. That's kind of tip number 2. Find the tonal center. In this case, for this song, it's going to be really easy because I'm telling you it's E minor. Now, you can think about it as E Dorian for you a little bit more like intermediate or advanced players, but that's only for a second. That C sharp right there kind of makes it Dorian, but it goes back down to C. So we're just going to call it E minor. Easy, easy. And the only 2 chords in here, which we'll get to later, are E minor and C. And there are some variants, but this brings us to our next point. The next point is when you're just starting out and you're learning a song, keep it simple at first. You don't have to play all the parts perfectly to enjoy playing along to a song. And that's really the best thing about playing guitar is just playing music, right? So keep it simple. And this song is a really good example of how to do that. Instead of thinking about all those moving notes, just playing E minor over that, right?
Yeah.
So just maybe strum an E minor while I play that part. And it sounds great, right?
Yeah.
So keep it simple. And that kind of leads into step number 4, and that's to break things down by sections. So this song has, 3 distinct parts, kind of? Is it 3?
Yeah, we kind of figured 3.
So don't try to tackle the whole song at once. No. Break things down into what would be, for this section that we're calling it the connector or the intro, the verse, and the chorus. So only worry about one part at a time. So on this song, we'll get to this later after we go over the chords and the strumming, but maybe just focus on that first part, all the lonely people.
What we're calling
just
the
focus
connector.
on that. Then once you have that down after a couple days, add the next part in, add the verse. Yep. Next day, a couple days after that, add in the chorus. You don't have to tackle the whole thing at once. You don't want to frustrate yourself, but you do want to make progress. You want to set little goals for yourself so you can reach them, right? The next one, tip number 5, kind of goes right with number 6 and 7 because we're going to separate the challenges, and that's tip number 5 is to separate the challenge. Instead of working on the whole thing at once, chord changes, strumming, making everything clean, take just one thing at a time and work on it. It'll make things a lot easier for you. So as tip number 6 says, maybe your first step to make things as simple as you can and separate the challenges is to just work on getting the chords down that you need in this song. And this might be pretty easy for you, but that's okay. All we're going to be learning is an E minor. And the other chord is just a C major. And this is kind of simplified, but those are really the only 2 chords you need to get through the song. So what you might want to do in your practice time for a few days, 2 or 3 days, if you don't know those chords, or if they kind of sound bad, just take some time to really focus up on getting those chords clean, especially that C chord. If you're a beginner, I know that's a really nasty one for some newer players. Even players that have been playing for a long time may have trouble getting a top note to ring out or something like that. So for 10, 15 minutes a day, only work on the chords you need to play any one of these songs, right? So work on that E minor. If it sounds bad, make sure your fingers are right behind the frets, right on the very tips of your fingers. Make sure you're not muting the neighboring notes. And check each string in that chord and make sure it's really pretty ringing out. And if it doesn't, just stop, start over, go all the clean chord tips that are on the Guitar Lessons member site and some of the series there, and make that your daily practice. Same thing with the C chord. We're not even worried about changing chords yet. We're just making sure we have the basic building blocks, which are the chord shapes, down first. Make sure that index finger isn't bleeding or muting that high E string, and make sure this third finger isn't muting the D string right there. So that's what I mean by divide up the challenges. So take a couple days to learn the chords for whatever tune you're playing, especially if you're a more intermediate player and you have some really funky voicings in there. You might want to take a couple days just to get those under your fingers. After that, if there are any like riffs or strumming parts to the song, you might want to work on those by themselves. And I kind of came up with two basic strumming patterns that you can use for this song in particular, and they're both very similar and they're both pretty easy, basic. One is just all downstrokes on the quarter notes. You want to play the melody real quick?
Which part?
1, 2, 3, 4. So simple, it works, it's great. So that's one thing you're going to want to add to your practice time is that strumming pattern. And I'm muting every strum. You don't have to. If you want to start out just doing like this, all downstrokes, start out slowly. Make sure it sounds good. Make sure you know all the notes you need to. Since this open E minor uses all 6 strings, you got all 6 strings on that chord.
One thing that I will mention to make it sound good is you're really relaxed with that, so you're not digging in when you're hitting those, right?
It's about to, the pick's about to fall on my fingers on this.
And that's why it even sounds good when you're doing what you're doing there. You're not muting; it still sounds good.
But if you want to do the muting thing, all I'm doing is coming down with my downstroke and then just immediately muting all the strings of this part of my hand. So that might be something you want to work on in your daily practice, right? So that's strumming pattern number 1 for this song. And all this is written down in the PDF, the chord diagrams and both strumming patterns. So if we're moving a little fast here, that's there for you. Don't worry about that. The second strumming pattern is really just a derivative of this strumming pattern, all downstrokes, that we were using. All it is down and up. So that's all down. And every time I do that, I'm making an upstroke, but I'm not digging into the strings, right? Second strumming pattern is just down, up, down, up. Straight down, up strumming pattern. So at the tempo of the song, it'd be. You want to do from the chorus. The connector. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's strumming pattern number 2 that you can use. And like this goes back to number 3, keep it simple. That sounds great. That sounds, absolutely. If I was out the coffee shop or something, I would love to be hearing this in the background. You know, it sounds awesome. So you don't have to have some kind of fancy strumming pattern all the time. Sometimes the simple things are what sounds the best. And there are a couple of more complicated strumming patterns in the other songs in the PDF. But this one and the other one I'm going to touch on are very simple, and you know, they sound good. They sound appropriate. Let's see. So that's number 7. In this case, learn the strumming. It could be learn the riff or whatever, or the melody. Number 8 is kind of the glue when you start to glue all the elements you've been working on together. So you've worked on your open chords, or whatever chords are being used, and then you're working on your strumming patterns maybe the following week. Number 8 is where you start to put everything together. But there is one very important point that I want to make here is I'm not going to be playing it to the track or to a metronome because I don't want to pressure myself. I want to make sure I'm giving myself time to get the chord changes down. So for example, the last part that we went over, C to E minor, back to C. Think about that E minor coming up now. So what you might want to do is just make sure to glue everything together and go section by section. Go with the little intro, then the verse, and then the chorus. So intro for a couple of days or a day or an hour, even however long it takes you, right? Then the verse for a day or an hour or a couple days. And then same thing with the chorus. Once you have all the individual elements together, then you can start trying to put it to the music or jamming with a friend or a metronome or whatever. That way you give your memory a chance to kick in and you've worked on making all the transitions clean. If you can't make those chords clean on their own, or if you can't make that chord transition clean on its own, then it's going to be really tough and it's going to be frustrating when you start trying to play along with the track because you're going to be falling behind and missing cues and things like that. So step number 8 is try to put everything together, but don't feel like you have to be pressed for time with a metronome or anything.
One thing I will mention, and I'm not sure if you mentioned it there, but the way that you're playing that E minor chord is important. I know a lot of people learn it with fingers 1 and 2.
Yep.
Do it with 2 and 3 so that when you change to that C chord, the movements are a lot smaller. Your first finger is kind of ready to go already down to the B string.
Otherwise, you have to...
It's a major movement, yeah.
Cool. Let's see. Write down the form. This number 9 kind of, if it's a song you're not super familiar with, or you just kind of want to get it learned quickly, or even any song, this will cut down on your memorization time. Once you have all the parts to where you can kind of get through them on your own, just make a chart of the layout of the song that'll help you kind of get a roadmap. Okay, intro, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, intro, whatever the song is.
Yeah.
And for this song, I'm going to mess this up, but that's okay. It starts off with the intro, what we call the connector or the intro.
Yeah.
So, and then it goes into the verse. So maybe you would write down how many measures the intro is. That comes first. And then write down the verse, how many measures that is.
Yep.
Then same thing, chorus, how many measures that is. And just go through the entire song and make yourself a roadmap. If you need to, you can write out the words and make your own little chord chart, or just put to the side of it, these are the chords used in this part. It doesn't have to necessarily be for this song. Just something as a reminder if you're having trouble remembering something. And then once you're done with that, and you have that written out, well, that's going to help you retain it better, number 1. Then it's time to jam with a friend, or metronome, or just pull up the original tune and play along with it. So those 10 tips will work for pretty much any song, especially the 12 songs here, because they're all pretty easy.
Yeah.
And no matter what level you're at, you should be able to get through these if you add this to your daily practice time. Spend a couple of weeks on each whatever song you pick. If you are more of an intermediate player, this is a great little template to keep in mind if you have to learn songs for a cover band. You're like, oh dear Lord, I have to learn 40 songs in 2 weeks. What am I going to do? This. And the biggest thing if you're an intermediate player to me, or intermediate to advanced, is active listening. Like before I learn songs, I'll just listen to them in my car or at work for a couple of weeks before, if I have that luxury. But I would encourage you, since the title of the song is learning or playing your first song, try this Beatles tune or any one of the other tunes on this list. Keep it really simple. Break things down by section. Divide the challenges by learning just the chords, then just the strumming pattern. Then try to put things together on your own in your own timing, and then start trying to play to the track.
Yeah.
And that hopefully there's something out of these 12 songs that you really like in here. This is quite a wide variety of stuff in here, so I wanted to put something that everyone might like.
Yeah. One thing I just see here in the chat from Delta V09, I think they're asking, can I use a C major bar chord for this tune?
Absolutely.
You totally can. I think for some people the transition might be a little harder, but I find myself maybe just naturally kind of leaning on bar chords even when it's not always the best, right? Because you can... right? It's easy enough. It's a different sound,
Yeah.
right? A little bit of a different sound. And one thing I will mention, in case for those of you guys who are watching and you're seeing Nate was playing a different type of C chord, and I was too, we're adding a G note on the bass.
Yeah.
And all it does is goes from to, just fills it out a little bit.
Also, I'm playing a C major 7. So just make that same chord and take your index finger off.
That's what you do. Nice.
Just gives it a little more color, and that's doable here because there's not a lot going on. If you was playing something that was clashing with it, I wouldn't do it, but it's not. So
Yeah. Yeah. And then one other thing I just wanted to mention is, are these all in the key that they are recorded in?
I believe so. Yes.
Which is kind of nice. So you can kind of work on it and then try and apply it and play along to the song, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I know they are. Like, that's one thing because when I was writing this list, I remember I was like, I know you're gonna have to learn different chords to learn different songs here, but that's good for you. It's gonna expand your chord vocabulary, and you're gonna be able to play along with these tunes, which is great.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very cool. It's nice to not always rely on a capo for every song.
Cool.
Yeah.
How much time do we got?
We got plenty of time.
Okay.
Plenty of time.
Just for kind of a different genre for you guys, I'll go through Achy Breaky Heart. If you know that song, Billy Ray Cyrus, I believe, is the artist on it. It's only 2 chords. It's an A and an E. And they're both open chords, just like the last song, which is great. So those are the only 2 chords you need to know to play this entire song. And only have one strumming pattern. So the challenge here, or the thing that you're going to be working on developing here as a beginner guitar player, is definitely chord transitions, because the chord transitions are pretty fast. There's not a lot of chord changes going on, but the strumming's fast enough to where you have to change chords quickly. That's what I mean. So, and the basic strumming pattern, again, is the same. One of the same as we used for that last tune. It's just straight up and down. So I would maybe start by just working on that strumming pattern. That's about the tempo of the song, I think.
Okay.
But if you're brand new to strumming and you're having trouble holding on to that pick or staying relaxed, slow it down as much as you need to. Stay really relaxed. Make sure, kind of like you're turning a doorknob or flicking something off your hand right there. That's kind of what you want to keep in mind for that. So take some time to develop that. 5-10 minutes a day, that's all it takes. Don't dig it too much into the strings or you'll have a hard time getting that pick through there. And I'm accenting 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm accenting 2 and 4 there. That's something you might want to think about doing too. You'll hear that when you go listen to the song. It'll be really natural. But it's something to keep in mind and work on as you're working on your strumming. For whatever song you're working on, pay really close attention to the strumming patterns and accents in the patterns, even if you're an intermediate player, because you can learn a strumming pattern and not have the feel of the song down exactly right, and that's something we can all always work on, right?
Absolutely. One thing I noticed when I learn strumming patterns, I'm not always even listening to what the guitar player is playing. You're listening to what the drummer's doing, right, in the rest of the rhythm section. Because if you're following the drums, as long as you're following the drums, it's at least going to sound good, even if it's not exactly what the guitar player might be playing. Yep. And one other thing I'll mention about that song that I noticed, I'm not sure if you're going to touch on it, but I see in the PDF the version of the E major chord that I have in there is with fingers 2, 3, and 4, and I think the transition might be easier to 1, 2, and 3 if you're playing the 2, 3, and 4 A chord, right?
Oh, that's weird. Yeah. I don't know how that happened.
It could have been me because I put this together. I could have messed that up. But that's one thing, because when you play your A chord with fingers 2, 3, and 4, which not everybody does it that way, but it's a good habit to get into. When you change to the E major chord, it's pretty easy transition. You switch to fingers 1, 2, and 3.
Cool, but I do make my E chord like that, depending on what's coming next. Not always, probably maybe 80% of the time I make it with 1, 2, and 3.
You make it with 1, 2, and 3? Unless you're maybe going to a bar chord or
unless
something.
I'm going like right there next.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's good to know both.
So this is a really great example. So once you get that strumming pattern down, you're comfortable with it. Start in on the chords, make an A major chord. Does it sound good, every single note? Or does it need some work? Does it sound like this? Now there's some dead notes in there. If there are, make sure to pull your elbow into your body. That helps, kind of, instead of sticking it out here. That helps you get a better angle of attack on the strings. fingers right behind the frets, as close as you can. And I know some people make an A like this. It looks like a D7 because it's easier to scrunch your fingers up in there. But I rarely do that. So just get your fingers as close to behind the frets as you can. Make sure your fingers are tall right on the very tips of your fingers. Make sure this third finger is not muting that high E string. And then go through the same process, spend 5-10 minutes a day just on the shapes at first. Same thing with the E. Check all those tips. And then once you have the shapes down, just work on that transition from E to A. And once you're feeling comfortable with that transition, start playing through the song at your own tempo. Listen to the song a lot, first step, listen to the song, and then start going through it at your own tempo, whatever that is, where you can play through it with that strumming pattern and getting that change in there very cleanly. And then all you gotta do is jam it with a buddy or pull up YouTube, listen to the song, play along with it. Yep.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So this is a really fun resource for you guys. Hopefully if you're just getting into guitar, there's something that you like on this sheet. There's a lot of really cool stuff, and it's really good because you're gonna have goals for your playing. It's like, well, I'm learning all these chords. What do I do with them? There are enough chords on here to where you'll know a good chunk of your open chords and have songs to play with them if you're new to guitar. Now, and if you're not, just you can ignore all the pages below the first one, and then just take the first page as kind of a guide for learning songs if you're a more advanced player.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's very cool. Okay, well, do you want to jump into questions?
Yeah.
You kind of ready for questions? Okay, so guys, we have some questions already, but if you want to ask a question, questions tab below the video player, send them in, and they don't have to be about playing your first song or about what we talked about. It can be about whatever you guys want to talk about. All right.
I forgot my footstool today, so my foot is on my guitar case.
Huh. Nice. Yeah. I don't play with one, but I find myself janking my leg up weird all the time.
Ever since I have back problems, so ever since that happened, I was like, oh, I have to have something done there. So.
Yeah, to have proper posture. Yeah. Before I start answering questions, Les Johnson, you sent in 2 questions, but one of them, the first one, it didn't come through. So I think you were meaning to send in 2 questions, so the first one, you'll want to resend that. All right. Okay. The first question here, this is from Rob Parr. He says, man, I have so much trouble with simple F chord and forget about it when barring. Also, I taught myself ukulele with no pick and now cannot use a pick with the guitar. It's just clunking and he has no control. Can we help?
Let's address the pick issue first because I think that's a shorter answer. If you don't want to use a pick, don't use a pick. It depends on what your goals are and what sound you like. If you like the sound of a pick or the idea of being able to use a pick, I would definitely make a concerted effort. And by that, I mean force yourself to use a pick over a month or something. Don't not use a pick for a month and see if you can train yourself to play. But the biggest thing is to make sure to relax. If you are holding stiff onto the pick, it's going to sound really clunky and right? This is a really thick pick. This is like 1.5 millimeters thick, I think.
Yep.
And it's really easy to dig in too hard with this one. But if you concentrate, and by concentrate, I mean just look back and focus and do something like this, literally. Look back, stay really relaxed. And the motion I'm using is kind of like this. My elbow's helping out, but most of it's in my wrist, right? And if I could flick this out of my hand.
Yeah.
So start with just downstrokes. Then once you're feeling comfortable with those, upstrokes are a lot harder for guitar players in general, usually. Number one, because they try to get through all the strings with their upstroke, and they dig too much of the pick into the strings. That's number 2. So you don't have to hit all the strings on the way up. And make sure you're using just enough of the tip of the pick for both your downstrokes and your upstrokes to make the amount of noise or volume you want out of your guitar. So that's your exercise for the next month, just getting used to that motion. This thumb's a lot softer. I have a thumbnail, so it's still a little bit kind of clanky sounding.
Yeah, it is.
But you probably don't. Most people that strum their thumb don't have a thumbnail. I could be wrong. So that's number one. Just put some concerted effort into it. And it's worth spending a month on that to decide if you want to have that as part of your playing or not.
Yeah. And then the second part of the question was the F chord.
If you're having trouble with bars, first of all, make sure you get your guitar set up so the action is as easy to play as possible, because that could be the problem right there. You could also go down a string gauge. So if you're playing on 12s, maybe try to go down to 11s and see if that helps.
Yeah.
You might have to get your guitar set up if you do that as well. But in the meantime, I would just recommend playing this F triad. You can play just these 3 notes. It's a lot like your C chord. You're just moving your second and third fingers over to where they're on the D, G, and B strings. Just those 3 notes. And if you want to, you can kind of break yourself into bar chords or the F bar chord by collapsing that index finger down and playing the first fret of the high E and the B string. That's a good kind of stepping stone. And a lot of times, especially if you're playing with other people, that's all you need. You don't need those lower notes in there necessarily. No. So I would use this F, A, C, F major triad, and then try adding the F on top with that kind of bar, little bar.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say the same thing. F is probably the hardest bar chord because it's so close to the nut. But a setup goes a long way. Okay, next question.
Show them your F bar chord.
Oh, yeah. I do this one. I find it's a little more natural because when you do this and you're trying to get this small bar, when you play a regular F chord, it requires a lot of strength coming from like this part, the kind of the V-shaped part of your hand. You have to squeeze. So what I do is I bring my thumb over. I've showed this before, and I fret that there. And you actually don't even need to fret it if you don't want to. And then I will either leave the third out, but you can have it in too. And all it is it's the triad. So this would be the triad. But when I bear everything down, and it's way easier for me to play than this. And I find that this transitions from here's my C chord. There's barely any movement. And I just find it's easier on my hand for my thumb to be over top for those chords. That's what I use.
Cool.
Okay, next question from Ted W. Hi, Nate and Andrew. Your live lesson last month has inspired me to start the fingerstyle acoustic guitar lesson plan. Nice.
Oh, awesome.
I had my 2001 National National Polychrome Tricone Resonator set up just for fingerstyle and slide playing.
Nice.
Oh, the National stuff. That stuff's cool. Any plans to have a live lesson on slide guitar?
I can tell you this: if it's coming, it won't be me teaching it. But I would really like to get somebody out here to do slide stuff, just because I only play slide when I show up to a gig, a cover gig or a church gig where there's a part written for it, and I'll learn that part, and that's it. I'm not a slide player, but if we do, it won't be me teaching it. I will get somebody out here that really knows what they're doing, that's really good at slide. That way, you'll be started on the right foot.
One little tip for people getting into slide, just learn to play in open tunings, because it's going to make your life a lot easier. A lot of the big slide players, except for Duane Allman, I don't know if you're a Duane Allman fan, he played mainly in standard, but they all play in open E or open D. Look up how to do those tunings. It's pretty simple. Open E, it kind of increases the tension on your guitar, so make sure your strings aren't too heavy. Open D is going the other way, and so if you want to play an open E, sometimes it's better to just play an open D because it reduces the tension on your guitar. And that would be a great way to start, because then basically everything you play is gonna sound like it's something. You can just kind of go up and you're playing a full chord when you play all the strings, instead of having to move all over the place with the slide. That's a tip that I had from someone. I'm not a great slide player. The only slide playing that I've done is swells, church swells and stuff like that. It would be cool. We'll have to get somebody else to do that.
The biggest tip I have for that is work on playing in tune. You could even check yourself with a tuner. Have a tuner up and be slide up to a note. Am I flat or am I sharp? And then that's the biggest thing I have. When I have a slide part to learn, that's the majority of what I spend my time working on, is getting in tune. And it takes me a couple of days to get back into that mode where I can kind of play in tune, all right, playing with the slide.
Yeah. The key is for the slide to sit directly over the fret, not behind the fret.
Actually, I've got a tip as well.
Okay, Matt.
So it's a Video Ninja tip, and you use a cup.
I am not doing that.
I'll try.
Actually,
Wait.
I'll use it in my coffee.
Nailed it.
Beer bottle.
Beer bottle's a lot easier, actually. It is. It's shaped for it.
Cool party trick.
Exactly. If I had higher action, it would have sounded a bit better.
Check out a guy named Brett Garsted. He plays in standard. He's a really good slide player, but he manipulates a slide. Like he'll lay it almost all the way sideways to get minor triads and things like that. It's
That's
crazy.
cool. That's cool. Another great, I'll give you 3 great slide players that I really like. Derek Trucks. Everybody knows Derek Trucks. Ariel Posen. Do you know who that is?
Nope.
Okay, or Ariel Posen. He's a Canadian guy, and he does more like sessions and things like that, but ridiculously great melodic slide player that I think he plays in standard, and he does like things where he's chording while he plays the slide.
yeah.
And also Joey Landreth.
Sonny, I was going to say,
Okay, he's
not
not
related.
related. Yeah.
Sonny Landreth was going to be my
Yes.
next one, but they're not related.
Yes.
So
And
just remember
Sonny
Landreth
Landreth is
and
a
then
great
go
one
look that
too.
up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, let's move on. This is a great question and something we should maybe explain more often. From CJ Fowler, what is a riff?
A riff is just a small, I would say it's just a small musical idea or hook.
You can call it a ditty. There you go.
I don't even know how to play it, but that's a riff.
Yeah.
What's another riff?
Oh man. Okay, you go. Oh, nice.
Green Day. That's
Yeah.
a riff. Yeah.
Any of those it's basically just something that's a little more than just chords.
Yeah.
We call it a riff. Sometimes it's just single note stuff. A lot of it's pretty loose terminology. Same thing with a lick. Riffs and licks are kind of close to the same thing, but usually licks involve a little bit more lead guitar, riffs are a little more rhythm guitar. But that's basically it. Next one from Mike Wright. What was the first song you ever learned to play, and why did you pick it?
I don't even know if I can remember that. I may have to think about that for a while and come back to it.
I'll answer.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Smoke on the Water was the first one. And I learned it on my front lawn when I was 8 years old. And my friend showed me on a little old classical, it was a terrible guitar, not set up well, and it was just that version. And that was it.
I really don't
It was barely
remember.
a song.
I would have to do some like major psychotherapy regression stuff to remember that.
You repressed the memory of the
I don't
first song you learned?
Probably.
That's funny. That's a good question, though. It's fun to revisit those sometimes. I learned a lot of AC/DC songs early on, too.
Those are great. As far as playing your first song, those are great songs to learn because they're a handful of chords, a handful of strumming patterns.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Never feel bad about learning simplified versions of songs, too. That's kind of what I did with the AC/DC stuff at first. Instead of learning like it exactly how Angus played it or whatever, my first teacher, I had a teacher for a year when I first started, he adapted it and made it simple. And I thought it was really cool. My friends thought it was really cool. I wasn't cool. Okay, next one here from Orioric. Question about posture. I find playing on my left leg way, way, way more comfortable. What is your take on the classical position? You mentioned on one of the lesson videos that it makes reaching frets easier. If that is the case, which is for me, why do you guys prefer the right leg / casual position?
Because I'm lazy.
Oh,
Exactly. Yep. I do prefer this, but I'm lazy, number one. Number two, sometimes it hurts my back just because I have a really messed up back. I'm not to say that this doesn't hurt my back sometimes, right? But I just in general, over time, like I'm practicing for an hour, this is a little tougher on my back because I generally am not leaning up against the back of the chair for the support.
Yeah.
But like in an ideal world, if I wasn't lazy, I would have a strap on my guitar and I'd be down here.
I'll see ya.
I'd have a strap on my guitar and just have it right here.
Ah, yeah.
Like playing a V or something, you know?
Yeah. I started gigging when I was 12, and so I had to stand while I played, and because of how my strap sat it kind of sat closer to my right hip anyway. And so all of my time playing standing up all the time, it just was most comfortable to always put it on my right. Like I have never played guitar in my entire life in classical position ever. I'd probably be better. And then I hope that kind of gives you an idea. But laziness is really what it comes down to. He has a follow-up question. Cool. This is about pick use. I incorporated scales into my daily practice routine for dexterity. Should I force myself to play down, up, down, up? Right now I have more control over my timing playing down only. Picking lessons are next on my list. Sorry if you answered it there.
Okay, there's a couple of different answers I can give you, but
I'm guessing by down he means
like if you're playing a G major scale, all downstrokes, right? That's great for developing your downstrokes, right?
For sure.
But what happens if you stick to only that? Your upstrokes, you're gonna go to play upstroke, and you're gonna be like. All upstrokes there, right? So maybe divide that up for a while, work on only downstrokes. It sounds like you might not need to though, maybe you're already advancing with that. But to get your upstrokes up to speed with your downstrokes, try playing through whatever scale you're working on, which is upstrokes. Right? And you're probably gonna notice a deficiency. You're not gonna be able to play as quickly with your upstrokes, and you're not gonna be as accurate. So give that equal time. It's really important. This is a really big weak spot for a lot of guitar players is their upstrokes. Because they come to depend on down at first because it feels more natural. And once you work on that, put them together. And you're going to notice that your alternate picking is going to be a lot stronger if you give some attention and some focus to your upstrokes too. Now, you probably weren't thinking about this, but economy picking too, people say, should I use just down, up, upstrokes, or should I do economy picking where you have more than one, like 2 downs in a row, down, up, down, change strings, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down. People are like, which one should I learn? And I think you should just learn both if that's what you're talking about. I don't think it is, but yeah, alternate picking versus economy, I think you're going to use them both.
Big time. And just remember, you're almost never musically going to play a scale through, right? You're always going to be doing it creatively, melodically, whether you're sequencing or whether you're playing a melody or whatever you're doing. So with all of those, you're going to be using upstrokes, downstrokes. You're also going to be going up and down and back and forth and sideways and all over the place. So the more that you can kind of change that up, the better. Because I don't think I've ever played a scale all the way through in a musical context. Or at least most people shouldn't, unless it's a very interesting scale.
But Eric Johnson uses upstrokes a lot when he's playing bluesy licks.
Do you think that's for just a tonal reason, maybe?
I think that's what he says. Yeah, nice. I think that's why he does it in use.
Okay. So we don't have a ton of time today. We're going a little shorter today. We have 4 more questions,
okay,
and then we're going to have to call it there, and we actually have 4 more questions. So 4 more questions. This is from Gerardus. Any plans on a jazz live lesson?
Not in the immediate future, but yeah, we are going to be definitely doing some jazz stuff in the future.
Yeah. Probably start with more like intro to jazz, getting kind of into it using...
Well, we'll probably pick one of the play-alongs from GS or something like that and dissect a little bit and use that kind of as a springboard for learning chord shapes and talking about jazz progressions and things like that.
Okay. Next one here from Kiwi CJR. Hey, Nate and Andrew, I like to play finger picking, but I've been told I should try finger style. Is there any difference?
Nope.
They are synonymous, so they essentially are the same thing. Yeah.
Finger style, people kind of associate that with steel string guitar.
Yeah, they do.
Classical people associate that with nylon string guitar, and it's just semantics. It's using your fingers on the guitar, right? Yeah. That's all it boils down to.
Yeah, and there are multiple techniques and ways, and fingernails, no fingernails, different techniques of anchoring and stuff, but it kind of all does fall under finger style.
Right.
Okay, we got 2 more from Les Johnson, so those will be our last 2 questions. So, the first question How many measures for verses and choruses do you guys tend to have a set amount of measures for the above? Or is it a case of whenever you think suits your style when writing your own songs? I know that there are only tools and not rules, as Nate's fiance finally stated, but would like to hear your opinions.
Generally 8, 12,
Okay.
16, something kind of evenish. Now, having said that, I've had drummers tell me before when I'm writing play-alongs and stuff like that, that I'll have an odd number of bars because it's just like the odd bar, let's say if it's 9 bars, will be kind of a lead-in or break into the next part of the song.
Yeah.
And that is a little bit odd for some people, but guitar players, I think, because I listen to a lot of guitar-oriented music, especially rock stuff that's a little more obscure, they tend to do that just because it's a nice way to change things up. So I would say, like you said, it doesn't matter. It's tools, not rules, but keep your end user in mind. If you want to write a pop song who you want tons of people to listen to, maybe keep it even, like 8, 12, 16. If not, who cares, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say only if you're writing maybe contemporary country, contemporary worship, or pop, then it's keep your verses really short. And that depends on, like, the tempo is going to change how 4 bars or 8 bars or 16 bars feels. So that's going to make a really big difference. I've been just lately in my own kind of noodling and playing, been trying to experiment with chopping bars in half or using like a weird number of beats in between sections and stuff like that and just playing around with that stuff. There's nothing wrong with it, right? If it sounds good, it is good.
Eleanor Rigby has a bar of 2/4 right in the middle, right before the for the chorus.
Before the chorus, yeah. It's super weird, and it was throwing me off earlier when we were going over it.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for that if you're going to play this song.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, just experiment. Especially, I know, Les, the music that you're making is really kind of cool, and I wouldn't even call it experimental. I think it's just like, it's more it's trying to be interesting with the sections and parts and kind of telling a story that way. So I would totally, I mean, a lot of people even love to mix time signatures. That's when you start getting really nerdy. Yeah. If you guys want to get into some cool time signatures, but it's still somewhat melodic, a great band is Periphery. Do you know Periphery? Yep. It's pretty heavy stuff, but they do some cool stuff that's not quite as like Meshuggah-y.
Yeah.
Because they are just crazy. It makes no sense. Polyrhythms and crazy stuff. Anyways. Okay, so this will be the last question. This is also from Les. I don't know why, but I tend to struggle with getting a good rhythm to fit in a measure. I'm not so bad at fitting leads into my songs, but getting rhythms to fit a measure I tend to take a long time, especially with slow rhythms. I'm not sure why. Any tips for creating a rhythm to fit measures? Much appreciated. P.S. I tend to strum until I get a rhythm to fit a given measure without breaking it down into smaller measures, quarter notes, eighths. I tend to play it by ear until it fits the measure.
The only thing I can think of there would be to try and sing what you're playing before you even think about measures or anything. Get the idea in your head, and then once you have something that you like the sound of, maybe see what it is, because it might be that you just like odd time signatures. I don't know. It could be that you just don't have a clear vision of what you want to play, or it could be that you just really like writing progressive music, like I know you do, Les. So maybe when you're doing stuff like that, put a drum machine on with a really definite beat for whatever time signature you're in. That's very, one set measure or 4 measures of 4/4, right? With a big drum fill at the end and then crash back into it. I can't remember what DAW software you're using, but it's going to have some kind of drum function in there. So
yeah, I was going to say, because this is a thing I work on a lot, is put on a metronome or a drum thing. And I just like to experiment. Like, I'll just kind of give you an idea on the spot. Nate, if you can just kind of like make a faux metronome at any tempo. So when I'm playing, like when I'm practicing, I'll... So what you can kind of do is you can start experimenting with just, hey, what kind of fits? Because it doesn't even have to be perfectly divisible or anything like that. You can start experimenting. And I would just leave that on for 40 minutes. And I would just play. And it's not like I'm doing anything melodically that's interesting. I'm just focusing on my rhythm hand and just focusing on doing weird stuff. And then it's like, oh, I think that's kind of cool. And if that then I can adapt that to a different tempo or anything like that. I find that works really well too.
Cool.
Okay, that is going to do it for questions today. Now, the next one we do is, let me just check here, finding the key of a song.
I think what I'm going to do in that, I'm just going to get a bunch of random jam tracks from the members area.
Yeah.
I'll give you 10, give myself 10, and then you can see the process that each of us go through for finding the key of a song. Because I know Andrew's is different than mine, so that'll maybe give people some different things to choose from as far as how to find what key a song is.
Yeah. The one thing I would just suggest for those of you guys that maybe don't have a ton of music theory under your belt, just know the major scale and know the major scale formula. And just kind of be thinking about that. I know in music, basically just go through Music Theory 1, and you should probably be good to do most of the stuff that we're going to talk about, right? Am I right?
Probably 1 and 2, I think.
1 and 2? Yeah. Okay. My method is probably just 1. It's I don't know if it's simpler or it's just how my mind works. I'm not sure. And then after that, we're going to be getting into some other stuff, but I am going to be doing a live lesson. Probably it's not in the schedule, but it might come up a little earlier on using overdrives and using distortions, and do kind of another gear related one, but maybe dive in a little bit more, get more specific, kind of help you guys if you maybe haven't used an overdrive before or want to buy a new overdrive or something like that. Be fun to go through some of that stuff. So I think that's the plan as well. Cool. Any other stuff that you wanted to mention, Nate?
I don't think so.
No? You got nothing else? No? Okay. Well, guys, as always, thank you for coming out, and thank you for all the great questions, and we will see you guys next week.